What the frickin' heck is up, everybody? So this is my 2019 TLX. It's like the A-Spec edition. I bought this maybe about a year ago, and today I'm gonna be putting some like upgraded brakes on it. It's these slotted rotors. I think it's Power Stop Evolution, carbon ceramic brake pads, and I'll kind of detail the process of putting brakes on a car like this. It's usually pretty simple. So first thing I'm going to do is jack the front up, put it on some jack stands, and then jack the back of it up and put it on jack stands as well. But before you do that, you got to make sure to loosen the lugs, right? So when it's on the ground, it's easy to overcome that torque that they've been torqued to. So that's going to be my first kind of action item here. And then we'll jack it up and put it on some jack stands, and I'll get a little time lapse of me going through this stuff. So now that I got them all loose, I'm gonna crawl underneath the back of this thing and look for a good jacking point. You know, I'm thinking that little crossbar right there should do. But what I will say is, if you are like unsure of where to jack from, what I like to do is just kind of jack on it slow and see how it behaves. And then if it feels sturdy enough, keep jacking. If not, then choose a different spot. And you can jack it up and then just put jack stands underneath it and not lower down the jack. But if you do need to have the jack for the front, then you'd want to set it on the jack stands, go up to the front, and then, you know, kind of switch them out. Alright, I actually chose a different spot to jack this thing up on, so I chose kind of the rear diff. And I'm going to be leaving the jacks underneath, like I kind of said in that previous clip. And now I'm moving on to the front, and I found a spot up there, and I'm going to be using this jack. And what you can do if you like don't want to, you know, put this metal onto a piece of metal and kind of want to keep it nice, if you're jacking up like a nice car or something, you can put like a piece of wood in here, right? Cut it to fit or whatnot. I think this guy will fit in there like that. And then maybe put a rag on it or something, just not to mar up your paint. And then you should be set to kind of jack it up if you have to put a nice paint job on your frame or whatnot. So yeah, a little time lapse coming. All right, got her all jacked up and on the jacks and some jack stands underneath her, so we're good to go. But this is the kit that I got. So I got front rotors. The back rotors are barely worn. So front rotors, they're the Power Stop products, and front kind of their performance brake pads. And then it comes with a bunch of hardware. It wasn't that expensive, probably like $200 for all this stuff. So now it's time to start disassembling this thing. But it's cool. They kind of gave me, or they give you a break-in like cycle that you got to do on here. You have to do 5 aggressive decelerations from 40 to 10, 5 moderate decelerations from 35 to 5, and then drive slowly to cool down your brakes for 5 minutes. So that'll be kind of interesting. I don't know, I drive this car quite a bit, so I kind of want to have some good brakes on here. So yeah, I'll start showing you guys how to disassemble this thing. It's real simple. So for a set of brakes like this, the first thing you're going to do is grab a wrench. You know, the longest wrench you can get in here, and undo these. They're just the brake caliper bolts. And then once those are pulled out, you can slide this off, and then sometimes these have screws in them, like this one has a screw in it. So you're gonna unscrew this guy and then pull the rotor off the studs, and then put your new rotor on, clean it up with some brake cleaner, put that on, put the screw back in it, put the, you know, fill this with the pads that you bought, get the old pads out of there, put these new clips in here, and then then you should be ready to rock and roll. Put these bolts back in and torque it down, and make sure you get the right torque spec so you're getting it tightened down how it should be. All right, I definitely didn't film what I did right there, but this thing was giving me a hard time, this bolt in the rotor. So I shoved a screwdriver in here. I tried impacting it, like using a step down and a quarter inch socket with a thing, a bit in there, and that didn't work. So these are like super important if you're trying to get those screws out. Basically, it's like a hammer. You hit it with a hammer, and then it puts like an impact to loosen it. And I also used a little bit of heat, so that probably helped as well. What happens is they'll get rusty. I don't know why they don't use stainless or something, but they'll get rusty, and then it'll seat on that countersink and then kind of like bond to itself, or bond to the rotor. So we got it out though, and I'll kind of show. I'm thinking I can probably get that with this thing on the other side. Looks a little less grizzly. So yeah, progress is being made. Fortunately, you didn't see me using the torch on it, but that seems to be the process. I might buy some stainless screws to put in there, because I feel like it's just annoying to have to go through that every time you change your brakes, but I might not as well. So yeah, got her done. Alright, got the caliper off and got this caliper bracket off, and now it's time to remove this rotor. I might try and film it while I take it off. There he goes. Easy. So there's no difference in size on these rotors, but you can see these are kind of like more performance-esque. They got the slots in them, holes drilled in them. I've heard that the holes are actually, you don't really need them. They just kind of evacuate water. But so yeah, I'm gonna throw this guy on. You got to make sure before you put these on to clean them with brake cleaner, because they put a coating on here so they don't rust. So if you're doing this, make sure to clean them with brake cleaner, both sides, on mainly the braking surface, and then throw them on and put the screw in there, and then you're ready to put your pads in there. Alright, new rotors look pretty fresh on there, so I'm gonna run and grab some Allen bolts from the hardware store, clean these up, clean the brake calipers up, and then load in those new pads. Alright, so I talked with my dad, and it sounds like these are just for assembly, so they don't even really do anything, so I'm not gonna worry about getting the Allens. So I'm gonna start throwing these brackets back on and loading them up with the brake pads, and then putting the calipers back on. Alright, that'll do it. So one thing I will say is you got to make sure to find out the torque specs for your braking system if you are going to put brakes on a car, and make sure to kind of understand how you take it apart, so then when you put it back together you can put it back together correctly. So yeah, onto the other side. I don't think I'll film it because it's kind of redundant. Alright, got the other side installed. These look pretty freaking awesome. I'm not gonna freaking paint the calipers or anything. I think that kind of looks a little ricey. So now it's onto the back. These ones are a little more complicated because they have this electric parking brake solenoid or actuator on there, so it's a little harder to get to the bolts, but we're gonna make it happen. Alright, so I got them off. It's definitely a little bit of a process. You saw I kind of use that bolt. It looks like there's a threaded hole in here. Or there's a threaded hole. I'm thinking that's what they kind of, it's a provision, so you can put a bolt in there and then push it out. So now I'm going to sand the glaze off the surface. I already did that to this rotor over here. And I also sanded kind of this area to paint it. So I'm going to work on that, get a little time lapse, and we should be set to put these on. Alright, so I got these painted, so there won't be any like visible rust anymore. Definitely looks fresh. I got the other side done as well. So now it's time to freaking throw this thing back together with those new pads. And then you saw that I sanded this. It's kind of to break that glaze that's from the old pads. So then you have a nice surface for those new rotors. So it should be good. Alright, so as you saw in the time lapse, I was trying to use the old frickin' channel lock, big channel locks to compress this, you know, brake cylinder. And it turns out that you have to take off this back, like, motor because it's an electronic brake and, like, spin the gear drive back there. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now. So I don't feel like a time lapse is going to be too beneficial here, but you can see on the back there's these Allen bolts that hold this little motor on. Alright, so you can see there's the motor, there's the drive, so I'm going to adjust this outward. Alright, so I got it adjusted, but just a note, if you're doing this, this spins, you want to spin it clockwise for it to move backward. So just a note on that. Alright, so I adjusted this just so it has just a tiny bit of drag. Right, so then it'll kind of wear in. So if you're doing this, make sure to not, you know, tighten it too tight. So this is like basically holding, because I think, you know, the parking brake, it's going to spin in there and tighten itself almost, adjust itself. So just a note on that. And I'm putting this back, the bolts back in this thing, put these lines back on, put this back in, and then I'm on to the other side. This has been a pretty easy install, but thank God for the internet, because that's where I figured that out. Alright, all brakes are installed. So there's the freaking back left, rear, front left, front right over here, boom, boom, boom. And then rear right. Got her done. I'm going to throw the wheels back on and then take it out for a test drive. Alright, she's back on the ground. So I did paint, you can see this part of it's painted black, and I didn't do that on the freaking front rotors. And I know it's gonna grind my gears in the future, but I'm gonna go take this thing out and test drive it. I'll let you know how it goes. All right, car drives good. I did a little break-in period or break-in procedure, and they seem to work great. So thanks for watching, and hope you learned something throughout this video. Definitely, it's kind of like a high-level overview of how to install brakes. It's pretty typical for most cars to kind of do what I did. And yeah, it's definitely relevant knowledge if you have a shop and you're trying to do your own brakes. So cheers. Hey, thanks for stopping into the Bluebird Enterprises YouTube channel. If you like what you saw, give me a big thumbs up, and hopefully you're leaving with a bigger smile than you came in with.